Let's look at a few techniques for creating an array of objects. We can create an array of objects in the same way we create any type of array. So let's declare an array of rectangles. Now, if we know ahead of time how many rectangles we're going to store in this array, we can give this an initial size like 3. But this would only work if we have a default constructor in the rectangle class. So if we comment out this default constructor, we get a compilation error saying no matching constructor for initialization of rectangles. The reason we see this is because as part of creating this array, the compiler needs to create 3 rectangle objects. Now currently we have only 2 constructors here, and both of these expect some values. So the compiler doesn't know how to create a rectangle object without these values. That is why we need the default constructor if we need to create an array like this, okay? Now here we can also initialize this with a few objects, and in that case, we don't need to specify the initial size. So we set this to a brace initializer, and by the way, the equal sign is optional, but I prefer to add it for clarity. Now inside the braces, we can provide a few rectangle objects. So we can say rectangle. Here's one rectangle without a width and a height. We can create a second rectangle with a width and a height, and one more with a width and a height and a color. This is one way to create an array of objects, but there is a shorter and more concise way. Instead of typing the class name here and explicitly calling the constructor, we can use the brace initializer again. So here we can pass empty braces. For the second one, we're going to pass a brace with 2 values, 10 and 20. And for the last one, 10, 20, and blue. Now let me reformat this code and remove the extra indentation. Good. So when we use this syntax, the compiler knows that each object in this array is an instance of the rectangle class. So when we use the brace initializer, the compiler is going to pass these values to one of the constructors of the rectangle class, okay? Now, here we can access any of these rectangles using an index. So we can access the first rectangle and then call the draw method. We can also loop over this array. So here we can use a range-based for loop. So for rectangle, rect in rectangles, here we can call rect.draw. Now with this for loop, in each iteration, one of the objects in this array is going to be copied to this loop variable. We can optimize this by using a reference variable. So we add an ampersand here, and now in each iteration, this variable is going to point to one of the objects in this array, okay? So we can create and use an array of objects just like any other type of arrays.